Hello, friends. Jellord here, coming at you because it's the 30th anniversary of Breath of Fire. So, I thought I'd make a little video here. I got my nice boxy Pixel Game Boy Advance SP that I built a while back. I got it in all silver when I built it because I wanted people to be able to tell at a glance that it was made out of aluminum. Real nice console. Got a USB-C port on the bottom that I added to it, and headphone jack makes it very convenient. Honestly, just a treat to have a console like this and to be able to build them. Here we go. Here's my copy of Breath of Fire here. And yeah, this is probably one of my all-time favorite games, Breath of Fire, as far as just like classics go. I'm a big RPG fan, and excuse me. This was probably the first RPG that I ever finished, that I ever beat. The very first one when I was a kid and stuff. And so right now, I believe I'm inside the final dungeon right now. But yeah, this was the first JRPG that I had ever finished. I had played Final Fantasy a little bit as a kid on the Nintendo, and also what else? I played a couple things like in passing, but I hadn't really like hunkered down and played some role playing games yet at that point. At the time, I was only about 12 years old. At that time, like my favorite games were like Mega Man X, um, and like Super Mario World on the SNES, and probably like the original R-Type and Donkey Kong. You know, those were the big games for me at the time. But growing up, it was like Breath of Fire was a bit more of a budget title as far as like you get it cheaper than any. You could get it cheaper than a copy of Final Fantasy IV. You get it cheaper than um, quite a lot of the more popular games on. I got to get Blues Magic back up. What am I doing here? And that's the thing. Talking about the original Breath of Fire, I think. Let me just talk about its weaknesses first and get those out of the way. Compared to the other RPGs on the console, Breath of Fire definitely lacked um, any kind of tactical finesse that the other games had. Like Final Fantasy VI or 3 was definitely a much more strategic or a strategically oriented gameplay experience compared to Breath of Fire. This game, basically, the strategy boils down to just use your best spell if you are in fact using a character that casts. Use your highest level spell. It doesn't really matter all that much what element it is, because some enemies are weak against elements, but the actual additional damage is like not ever anything substantial enough to like be super impressed by. So for the most part, you can kind of ignore enemy elemental weaknesses and stuff like that. Um, and I mean, a lot of magic, it just does a set amount of damage. Like it doesn't seem. These guys give a lot of experience. That's cool. It doesn't really seem like it matters. Like this, for instance, observe. She's going to do, I think, 95. Okay, 90. And then she'll do 95. Yeah, so the Trident and the Flame Rapier deal 95 and 90 respectively. And then if this guy survives, I'm going to hit him with a Bolt X. Bolt X is just going to deal 400. If I'm not mistaken. Unless there's more to this than I'm aware of. Yeah. So, like, just those little examples there, you can see the enemy's defense against these spells does not factor in however much wisdom I have. My character's wisdom, which translates over to intelligence, I think almost. Let's see here. Intelligence 174, wisdom 166, and I think like one of these pieces of equipment is what's bringing the intelligence up to 174. So the modifier as it switches from wisdom to intelligence there, the only modifier we're looking at is like whatever equipment modification you might have. So the statistics in this game are pretty straightforward, and a lot of the magic and stuff is not even tied to your stats. It's just a static set amount of damage that you're dealing. So that's just another layer of non-tactical gameplay we're talking about. That's why it's always just strongest spell. If they happen to be weak against the spell, like if they're weak against fire, the spell will deal like maybe 40 more points of damage or something. It'll deal like 20% more damage. But the thing is you'll still end up dealing more damage by using your strongest spell, even if they're not weak to that strongest spell. You know, you might be dealing 250 damage with a fire spell that normally does 200 because the enemy's weak against fire. So it's like, but if you go over and cast Bolt X, that shit's going to be dropping for 400. So it pretty much defeats the whole point. Defeats the purpose of even bothering. Am I going backwards? I don't think so. It defeats the purpose of like really making tactical choices between what kind of spells you want to use and shit like that. I really do think I'm going backwards, maybe. No? Oh shit. Here we go, fighting Jade. I think even if you say yes, it doesn't matter. Yeah, they just lock you into this. Yeah, I changed my mind. I joined him for a second, and then I was like, nah. So, yeah, as far as combat goes, yes. Not a lot of tactics there. Even with the dragons, the heroes' dragons, it's like you're just turning into the dragon and you're attacking over and over again. The dragon doesn't have other moves. It just does what it does. Cool cutscene. So I would say that this game, compared to like, here we go. This is it, everybody. This is the battle. Let me see if I can prop like a Super Nintendo game under here. Can be done. Perfect. Maybe not so perfect. I have a better idea. Yeah, as if to illustrate my point here. This is the battle with like the second to last boss in the game. So yeah, in terms of gameplay, I think Breath of Fire falls short compared to other RPGs on the console, on the Super Nintendo. We're just talking about the Super Nintendo here. But I think where it really delivers is in the graphics, the graphic department. I think it's one of the best. Breath of Fire 1 and 2 are the best, like some of the best looking RPGs on the Super Nintendo, especially if we're not including Japanese releases. I mean, I suppose we could. Then there's a couple other games, but they at least look as good. They're all right there with each other. Breath of Fire 1 and 2 are right up there with the best looking Super Nintendo games, I think. Jade grinned fearlessly. I mean, I suppose I get in here and drop a cure. And then you go back to auto attack. And I've seriously got like 30 some of those cures. So this is hopeless for this guy. Anyway, I think graphically it's one of the best on the console. Breath of Fire 1 and 2, either game. Breath of Fire 2 I think looks a bit better than 1, but they both look great. There goes Jade. Oh, the goddess of destruction. And we're going to pick up that Emperor sword. Not that it matters at this point. It is pretty sick, though. It's like a huge boost in damage. You know, oftentimes I would leave here with the Emperor's sword for no particular reason, because there's nothing else to do in the game besides go forth and beat the last boss. But, yeah, as I was saying, I think that Breath of Fire 1 and 2 have some of the best graphics on the Super Nintendo, for RPGs, at least. And, decent music, but I think that other games have better music. Like Final Fantasy IV, I think, has better music. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest might even have better music. I can't remember. I don't want to waste casting. I don't want to waste casting my Agni spell on her first form if this form's going to be a pushover. It's been a minute since I beat this game. Plus, I've never actually beaten it for the Game Boy Advance, because they say that there's like some other cutscenes, but really it's just other still shots, some still shots of enemies up close that you don't get to see in the original, which is still very cool, if you ask me. It is also cool that I get to beat the crap out of this lady with my newly acquired Emperor sword. At least I get to do something with it. So many games give you like your final weapon and there's fucking fuck all to do with it. No, bitch. No. I guess. Oh, right. I guess I had to use Agni so that she would reveal her true self. Here goes. Then we can get into a fatal battle of auto-battling her to her demise and maybe using a cure. Eat it. Also, I'm like totally over-leveled for this. You can't challenge me to a fight, you're only humans. Yeah, lady. Damn. Hell yeah. Agni. My boy. He's doing it big. This fucking thing. How much damage is that going to be? A fair amount. Okay, so, yeah, like I was saying before, I think the only way that Breath of Fire on the Super Nintendo beats out the best classics on that console is graphically. I do think Breath of Fire looks a bit better than Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy V. That's not to say those games have bad graphics. I just think this game has better graphics. And this game is much more colorful than most of the other RPGs on the console, except for maybe Lufia. I will give it to Breath of Fire 2. Breath of Fire 2 does a bit better job with characterization. The characters are a bit more interesting. They're all at least useful. In this game, some of the characters are kind of useless. Mogu is kind of useless. By the end of the game, Bo is kind of useless. I mean, he gets a pretty high... He gets the hero bow. Like, he gets his final bow, like, kind of earlier than... then everybody else gets their final weapons. So that gives him a little bit of an edge. Same goes for Ox. Same thing for both those guys. Bo never learns any new spells. He just keeps the spells he started with, and those deal the same damage throughout the whole game. So it's like, in a way, that's kind of okay, because you know you're going to have a baseline of damage, but his attack will always outshine those spells. So he's kind of useless. You know, Karn disproportionately has more abilities than any of the other characters. He can unlock treasure chests. He can find traps. He gets his final weapon pretty early on, too. Once you get to Prima, basically. And after you progress the story a little further than that. And then he gets the ability to turn into all the different forms that combine all your characters. Which, that's another thing I'd bring up, like... that this game holds over, I think, the other role-playing games at the time on the Super Nintendo. The transformations, you know? Like, the fact that you can turn into a dragon, the fact that you can combine your characters to make hybrid versions of them with Karn. I think all of that's pretty cool. And none of the other RPGs at the time were doing that. So that was interesting. The fact that you could start a little shop with Gobi, that was something cool that you didn't get in the other games on the Super Nintendo. That was something that happened in Dragon Quest IV, which was neat. That was the only other instance I could think of back then where you were running a shop in a video game and doing that side of the game, which was kind of cool. So that's a cool aspect of this game, I think, too. The music is okay, but like I said, the music for all those other games are much better. And I would say Chrono Trigger beats this game pretty much in every department, including its graphics. At least rivals the graphics. I'd say these graphics are I think these graphics are as good as Chrono Trigger's graphics, personally. You know, we could debate it all day, but I do think Chrono Trigger has great graphics, but I think Breath of Fire 1 and 2 have awesome graphics as well. This was like Capcom's golden age, I think, for their pixel artwork. They were doing some pretty awesome stuff between games like Street Fighter, some of the shmups they were doing at the time, some of the beat 'em ups they were doing at the time, like Knights of the Round and King of Dragons. All those games had very cool sprite work. Yeah, they could do some amazing things with the Super Nintendo graphically, Capcom. But yeah, I think those are the strongest points that Breath of Fire has. There we go, beat it. Combat, not great. I'd say 2, like Breath of Fire 2 was an excellent game. I think they really improved the everything about it. The music was better, the graphics were better, the story was much better. This game had a pretty weak story. I mean, you could sum it up pretty quickly. It's just like light dragons, dark dragons. Light dragons kind of lost their powers. Dark dragons showed up to squash them because, you know, according to the legends, they're the only ones who were going to stand in the way. And they were basically both fighting, vying for the favor of Tyr, which is basically the goddess of destruction. And she pretty much said that she would grant a wish to the dragon clan, whichever side won, essentially. That's fun. I will remember that you saved the world. That's hilarious because the Dragon Lord is what you talk to this guy to save every time, and he said he's going to remember that you saved. So, beginning of a new legend. Gobi. Just telling him how it is. We're flying everywhere, take care of the problems. Although I solved all the damn problems. I don't know what the hell they're talking about. They even rebuilt the fucking city that got smashed early on and made a statue of the hero, man. There's the crypt. That was one of the more fun dungeons, honestly, in the game. That was a tough one the first time through when I was a kid, getting through the crypt. This game was great, though. This game is a great game for, like, a first RPG for somebody. I really do think. Awesome, bright, colorful graphics. Memorable characters in design, if anything. You know, they were all very distinctive. You had an ox guy, a dog guy, a fish guy, a couple of humanoid characters, a bird woman, a snake woman. It's all very cool stuff. I honestly think the second game was an improvement in every way, except the way that they handled the dragon system. I didn't like that it was basically like you were just summoning a dragon, like the same way you would in you'd summon Bahamut in like Final Fantasy 3/6, or even Final Fantasy 4. You summon. It didn't matter. It was like all the dragons. They'd use up all your magic. They'd fly in. Granted, it was cool as hell for the Super Nintendo. The little cutscene of it flying in and blowing the shit out of everything. Very cool. But I really do think that it would have been much better if they'd followed through with this combat system and just had your dragon, once you transform, you just stayed as the dragon. I'm curious to see if there's any differences with this ending. This was here. Oh, they didn't do this, though. They didn't show Sarah's face. That's cool. So yeah, I would say the Game Boy version is probably the superior version of this game in a lot of ways, just because they cut the encounter rate down by half, if you can believe that shit. And I love Sarah's dragon there with the pink and white. It's pretty cool, the long neck. Yeah, they cut the encounter rate by half, doubled your experience, and I think like quadrupled the money, which is wild. But yeah, look at all these enemies. The sprite work is incredible for all of them. Like that is super cool right there. Like I don't think the Final Fantasy games have graphics that look like this, that look this good on the Super Nintendo. I really do, but it could be a personal preference, right? The sprite work for Yoshitaka Amano's monsters in Final Fantasy VI is pretty incredible. It's just like where I'm critical of that game is the character sprites. I don't think the character sprites are great for Final Fantasy VI. You know, the fact that they look the same when you go into battle, as they do in the overworld. And in 4, you even had like a even more chibi sprite version of yourself on the overworld map. And then you had kind of a bigger chibi sprite version of yourself in the battles. They changed it so that they were all the same size in and out. But I think this game does it a bit better by showing your characters in like full form, non-chibi action on the screen. You know, if they gave the character sprites the same treatment in Final Fantasy VI as they did the enemy sprites, I think it could have been pretty fucking cool looking. But, you know, there was only so much screen real estate. That you could really, you know, you couldn't make the sprites gigantic. That's new. That wasn't there. That's pretty cool. Yeah, like I said, so this is the first time I've completed the Game Boy Advance version of Breath of Fire 1, the original. But yeah, you know, happy 30th anniversary here. I wonder if I just have to shut it off or if it'll go back to the title screen. I'm going to pop in Breath of Fire 2 real quick here. See if I have a... Ooh, to be continued. That's cool. That there's something afterwards. Anything else, or does it just go to the opening title screen? Looks like it just goes opening title. I wonder if there's going to be like a star next to my... If there's any indication. No. I'm just in Romero. All right, let's see. I'm pretty sure on my other on my copy of Breath of Fire 2 here, I have a completed. We got them orange flames instead of the red. Yeah, we got a quick save. Let's see what's up. Oh, it looks like I must have been doing a playthrough of a second time, which I'm gonna go ahead and reset that. And I wonder if I can just load my other save. Where am I at in this game? I'm in the dream world. I must have done some pretty crazy leveling. Yeah, like I said, take a look. These graphics are great. These character sprites look much cooler. So, I mean, it's hard to make the real estate argument, considering this screen is even smaller. And yet they can display the characters like this. And you play Final Fantasy 3 and you got those little chibi guys up the side of the screen. Don't get me wrong, I love it. I'm not talking shit, but I'm saying this is way cooler. I will say, too, in this game, they did improve the strategic end of gameplay and combat, but honestly not by a whole lot. So the Final Fantasies still have it, and Chrono Trigger, of course, beats out all of these games because it's the GOAT. But yeah, you know, I'm not gonna like get too much farther in Breath of Fire 2 here. Just wanted to pop it on in lieu of the 30th anniversary, and I don't know, just talk a little bit about one of my favorite games. I guess Breath of Fire 3 and 4 are the ones that are really discussed the most, tend to be the ones that people focus on. If anything, especially people that are, you know, more on the touristy end of looking into classics, like they're just looking for the air quote best games. They'll probably end up playing Breath of Fire 3 and 4 and skip over these, you know, because they'll hear something about the random encounter rate or some such nonsense. These games are totally worth it on the Game Boy Advance, though, even if you're just emulating it. Which is, you can emulate this shit on your phone, man, and I guarantee you this game is way cooler than most of the games that you can get through Google Play Store, and you get this shit for free on your phone if you just do a little bit of diddling around. Breath of Fire 3 is great. Excellent game. I really don't have any criticisms of that because they followed through with also still having incredible graphics that hold up because they're stylized, you know. It's basically like anime style. Um, the gameplay is great. The dragon system of like all the different dragons you can potentially come up with by combining three of the dragon gems. That shit was super cool. Also, taking advantage of the 3D environment, which was like a new thing for the PlayStation at the time. They really took advantage of that in terms of hiding all the dragon genes throughout the world. So you really had to manipulate the camera angle in a lot of cases, so you wouldn't see some of these genes hiding out that were totally missable. But if back in those days, missable stuff really just gave you an excuse to play the game again, rather than criticize it. But Breath of Fire 3 was an incredible game. I don't think I really the fishing system that they expanded on was awesome. Graphics were awesome. Music was great and memorable. Story was good. Really, just hands down, just a really really awesome game. And then Breath of Fire 4 was even better. Only criticism I'd come back to Breath of Fire 4, Breath of Fire 3 went to, you turning into dragons and like you stayed as the dragon throughout combat. And then in Breath of Fire 4, they did this thing where you were kind of just summoning the dragons again, And they were making the dragons like 3D renders that came in almost like a summon spell, like Final Fantasy, because, got to do that back at the time. But that's not to say it was a bad game. It's still an excellent game. I enjoyed it quite a lot. I think it's probably the best pixel graphics you'll ever see out of any of these mainstream companies, because they're probably not going to be doing too many pixel style games anymore, besides just re-releasing some of their classic fighters and stuff like that. Moving from Breath of Fire 4 to Breath of Fire 5. Now I hold the very seemingly scarce opinion that Breath of Fire 5 is an awesome game that did a good job of evolving the series forward into something unique. Because in a lot of ways, it's like Breath of Fire was just checking all the boxes that many of the other JRPGs of the time were checking. And it's just like when Breath of Fire 5 came out, Dragon Quarter, people didn't really. Roguelike games were not very popular. At the time, it was hardly a genre. It was a genre it was relegated to like a couple of Sega Genesis games and some obscure PC games, basically. And that was it. Like, I could think of the Genesis. I have the game for Game Gear that was a roguelike, but anyway, doesn't matter. That as a genre was not real big. And there was really no such thing as a roguelike RPG that played out like a more traditional RPG. And yet, Dragon Quarter did so many interesting things. Like, the battles had an element of like a tactical style game because you moved your characters like units and you had to balance. You used the same points. You used your AP to move around and to do attacks. So you really had to kind of balance out repositioning your characters and getting them out of danger. You had to balance that out with your ability to attack the enemy as well, And it was the combat was awesome. They added some really unique, kind of blended some Resident Evil elements into the gameplay, some pseudo horror elements of just the way the enemies would chase you and the way they would notice you. But you also had items you could use outside of combat to lure enemies, so that you could slice them with your sword and get an advantage on them. Or if they were enemies you didn't want to fight, you could throw meat out and have them munching on that while you ran past them. You could also throw out poisoned meat to poison them before you engage them in combat. You could throw out dynamite and all sorts of other different. You could get proximity mines, different types of explosives of varying magnitudes. All sorts of cool items you could use against the enemies preemptive to combat, which was a very unique idea. You could also, getting strong enough, you could kill those enemies without even having to enter combat, just like we see in Metaphor Refantasio in current day, which is interesting. Uh, Fantastic game. And the fact that like if you were too weak, you could just keep looping back to the beginning and keep all of your party experience, beef your guys up, you keep all your items. Like, what's not fun about that? It's like, oh, this boss is too tough. I'll just restart the game and keep all of my party experience and keep all the equipment that I have so that I'll cakewalk my way through the first leg of the game and be 10 levels further than I was by the time I reach that boss. And I'll get to that boss in like a third of the time, because people complained at the idea, they didn't understand having to like go back through certain parts of the games. But the game had a very cool system where it would show you more bits of the story the more you played back through it. They would show you additional cutscenes from the perspective of different NPCs and what they were up to during different parts of the story, like just basically covering more of the tapestry of what the hell was going on. I think Breath of Fire 4 is fantastic. I'd like to do, like, once I get things set up more, I'd like to do a playthrough of that game on my shitty little channel here. Of course, there was the Breath of Fire mobile game as well that we didn't even get over here in the West. We're probably lucky for it, too. Didn't taint those of us who were longtime fans. It didn't sour our view of the series or taint was what was once good. Well, I guess that's pretty much all I've got. This is Breath of Fire 30th anniversary, I guess. And I doubt Capcom's going to say shit about it. It's going to come and go without them saying a fucking word. Come on, Capcom. Can't you at least like release? Give me a Switch cart, maybe even two, that you could just throw Breath of Fire 1 and 2 on there. And then 3 and 4 on another one. Or we know they have the technology. You can put all the games on one cart, you pieces of shit. Put all the games on one cart, 1 through 5 for us. Come on, Capcom. All right, that's it for me. Chellord out. We'll see you at some other point, if anybody even watched this shit. Later.